So the last time we met, we wired up our Jiffy API app, which takes in an input and produces a cool little GIF output like this. We're pulling all of these GIFs from a results array that we get, or a data array that we get back from hitting the Jiffy API with these few lines of code. Because it's so fun, I think that instead of just pulling a random result, we should just pull every single GIF we get back and display it in bite-sized format. If you want little digestible chunks of information, this is the perfect opportunity to use cards. And cards are usually implemented in a bunch of different frameworks, but in this case, I think Materialize just does a fantastic job with cards. If you navigate to materializedcss.com, this is, as they put it, a modern responsive front-end framework based on material design. And material design is the design methodology used by Google. So any Google products will be very similar to material design. And because of that, they're super useful for a situation like ours. And to get started, all you need to do is head to Getting Started. And they have a CDN right here where you can copy and paste their CSS and their JavaScript. Now, one note, their JavaScript will not work unless you include jQuery as well. As a heads up, they don't tell you that, they don't let you know, but you'll see an error in the console if you don't include it. So I'm just gonna give you a heads up, and then I'm going to do that in a second as well. So if you copy this little section right here and paste it directly into the head of both your index.erb and your results.erb, we're going to schnaz this up a little bit. And you'll see immediately the applied schnaz. In results.erb, I'm going to have to actually turn this into an HTML page or an ERB page. Doc type HTML. Oops, excuse me. HTML tags, head tag, body tags. And in the head of the file, I'm going to drop this in there. Now again, this script tag, it is the materialized JavaScript, but it depends on jQuery. And jQuery is a library that makes writing JavaScript a little bit easier. So if you just type into Google jQuery cdnjs, you should be able to find the very first link will direct you to, here it is, jQuery.js or jQuerymin.js. Either of these will work. Just copy it, head back into the head of your file, and drop a script tag right here with the source equal to the link you just copied. And that should include jQuery in your project, making everything work exactly like you want it to. And so with all of the setup out of the way, let's go ahead and start implementing Materialized CSS in our project. The first thing you have to do, or you don't have to do any of this, but the first thing you should do is we should take this image again, and we should just drop it right in here. Now in this case, we're only returning one URL. We're going to change that up. And this time we're going to return the URL of every GIF in the data results array. To do that, we're going to need a little bit of iteration in ERB, but we're also going to need to get a template through which we can iterate over. Here's how you go about that. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to head into the Materialized CSS page, and we're going to click on the components logo on the left, or tab. Once you open that up, you can head down to the part that says cards, and you'll see all the lovely ways that Materialized CSS implements cards. And you'll see all the HTML that creates cards in Materialize. Now the one we're going to use is an image card because they just look so fly. And if you want, the one I almost always use is the card reveal. I just really like this because you click on this little section right there, this little icon, and it pops up and down, and I don't know, I just really enjoy that. Don't ask me why, it's just like, I'm a fan. So all we're gonna do is we're gonna grab it. Take all that HTML right there and drop it directly into your original page. So back in our results.erb, And once again, you click on Components, Cards, and scroll down to where it says Card Reveal. And then we're going to click on this section right here. You also need one other thing to make that logo work, but we won't worry about that for the time being. And right below the image, I'm going to paste this card, just like that. And you'll see the div and all of the HTML come with a bunch of classes. All of these classes are what make this image, this card come together. And so you'll see at one point, you'll see an image HTML tag on line 15 here with the source equal to images/office.jpg. Let's replace that with our embedded Ruby and see how it looks. Ta-da! And I'm going to save this. And I actually don't know, but let's go ahead and just try and refresh this and see if we get what we want. Continue. Uh-oh. Okay, well there's a card. The issue here is that this card is way too big, so let's make it card small. And that should fix our problem, I think. Refresh this. No, it sure did not. Okay, how do you make cards small again? Let's see. It has some options here, it'll tell you how to do it. Card sizes, okay. No, that should work. Limits the height of the card to 300 pixels. You know, I'm not 100% sure why that didn't do what we wanted to do, but so be it. We'll figure it out in a little bit. So, what's that?
Did you blow up the page really quick first?
I don't know. You know what? I'm going to put this inside a div with a class equals container. Maybe it is blown up really big. I think you might be right, Margaret. It's just really big too? Okay, maybe not. You know what? It's okay. If you put everything inside a div with a class of container, it'll center everything. So at least we can make it smaller. The other thing you can do is you can give them sizes by saying something like LG3, and that'll take up only 3 columns in your grid that you get for free with Materialize. There we go, that's a little bit better. Still not quite what we want, right? And I'm at 100, and again, this is not exactly perfect, but you get the idea of what I'm trying to do here. And I'm actually going to make this look much nicer in a second, just so that we can see exactly what we're trying to accomplish. Oh, there's a cat and a dog fighting with lightsabers. I want to see the whole image though, and so this is just not going to cut it until that works out. And again, we don't have the logos here, but you can see that our JavaScript is working nicely, and this card is slowly coming together. So one of the things we'll need to do is we want to create a card like this for every single GIF and every single GIF URL. To do that is we're going to pass not just the URL, we're going to pass an array containing all the URLs. A way to do that is to map over the original result array and only return the URL from each array. Now this is a little bit of Ruby, it's a little bit of iteration, and I want to show you how we can accomplish this. We would say something like GIF URL array is equal to result array dot map due to each GIF item, which I'm just going to call item. We are going to return the item and then the rest of this stuff right here. Images, fixed height, URL. And what this should do is it should create a new array for us in GIF URL array, holding only the URL of each GIF. And so then we don't need anything else except to return that array of GIF URLs. So I could just leave this here and that'd be totally fine, but I'm just gonna, for posterity, so you know exactly what I'm returning, return the GIF URL array. And back in our application controller, right here where it says GIF URL, I'm gonna change it to GIF URL array. And by doing this, we can now access the array containing only the URLs from each of those GIFs inside our results.erb page, iterate over each one, put them in a row, and just have a bunch of cards containing our, we're going to call this GIF Saurus Rex, because there's going to be a ton of GIFs in here, and I love dinosaurs. So all we're going to do is inside this div with a class of container, we're going to create another div with a class is equal to row. And the really coolest thing about something like Materialize or Bootstrap is that you can create rows and columns really, really easily. And I'm going to leave everything else inside the div with the class of row. I'm going to add some space in there because we're going to iterate inside this row. We're going to iterate over each one and create a column containing just the card with the GIF in it. So I'm going to get rid of all this because we're just going to say column in a second. But let me show you how we would go about this. Inside this little row section, we are going to start our iteration. To start our iteration, we would say something like %sign. And what did we call that variable we passed in the application controller? GIF URL array. Yeah, it's an instance variable. No, you're absolutely right. It is an instance variable, 100%. And to each of those, we want to do to each URL, we want to give the URL to the card right here. So we can just say URL. And this will iterate over every single GIF URL in our array and render a card that has the GIF in there. And instead of saying this is a link, I'm just going to say check out this GIF. And I'm just going to leave the rest of that stuff because it doesn't matter. Now the problem is that none of these cards are going to display correctly, and we do need to add a end right here. At the end of our ERB so that it all looks nice. And I'm going to format it correctly just so we can tell that it's nested. So again, what we're doing here is we're hitting the Jiffy API inside the model. We're getting all of the data back as an array. We're going over every single item in the array, and we're only pulling out the URL for the GIF. We're putting that inside an array and giving it to a results.erb page where we're going over every single URL in that array and putting it inside a card so that it looks fly. Now, usually you would also add some other piece of information, maybe about the GIF, maybe where the source, where it came from, the name of the GIF, something like that. And when you save this, we have a row right here, and you can create columns in Materialized CSS by going to CSS and to the grid. It shows you how to create a container, which centers everything on the page, how their grid system is set up into columns and rows and columns, excuse me. You create a div with a class of row, and then every single div inside that, you give a div with a class of call for column, and then however much space you want it to take up, which is kind of nice. So I don't want to go too much into this because we can talk later on if you're interested, but let me show you what it does when you actually use it. We have a row here, and then we have a div with a class of card, call, and we're going to say LG. We're going to have each one take up 1/4 of, or 1/3 of the screen. LG4, S4, M4, which just means for large screens, I think it's L4 actually. Large screens take up 1/3 of the screen. For small screens, is it dash or is it? No, it's just the actual number itself. So it's just LG4, S4, M4. Maybe it's just L4. I always have to go back to this a million times to make sure I have it right. Let's see what it says. And by the way, you can offset them. You can do all kinds of cool stuff here that I'm not going to go into extensively just because I want to show you how to do it, how it works first, and then if you want to talk about how to do it, no worries. Yeah, it's just L. Cool, so watch this. We're going to render this, and I'm going to head back to our main screen here, and I'm going to refresh this page. Upon refreshing, you immediately see Materialized CSS take over. The font has changed, the inputs are now different, and by the way, I would usually change the buttons also because the buttons in Materialized CSS just look so good. You want to put everything inside a div with a class of container, because it centers everything. Oops. Yikes. And pop it down here. Let's go ahead and indent all of that. And again, refresh this. Let's see how this works. Cool. Now everything's centered. This just looks so much nicer. You can use placeholders in here. I'm going to look up Panda because I love Panda GIFs. And I'm going to click Submit. And we're going to see a bunch of cards displayed. And now I haven't standardized these cards yet with actual styles, but you can see these tiny little digestible piece of information with panda GIFs iterated over throughout the list. Now again, this looks terrible as of right now because I haven't told all of the cards to be the same size. This is where card small or card medium would come into play. So let's just say card medium and refresh it, continue, and boom. Now all the cards take up a certain amount of space. Giphosaurus Rex, you see all these pandas. That one's probably not appropriate again. Like I said, make sure you add an extra query for the rating. Right? Tell me about it. This is usually a pretty safe one. I was running the Code with Classy class one time and I looked up Carly Kloss, and you'd be surprised. There's a lot of ones that I just don't know if they're right for that course. But this is one of my favorite ones. I use this GIF all the time in like my actual apps. It's a great one. This is just a fantastic GIF. Like pandas eating stuff is just adorable. Baby pandas. Again, like this is so much fun. I don't even know what's going on here, but it's kind of cool. Neither there. Like I said, like this can be really fun for kids because they just want to see a ton of stuff. This is like what you'll see in a Facebook feed. Like you'll see things displayed in rows, like all your friends in rows and columns. Like this is great for social media. You'll see this in stories and Instagram profile, whatever. All that stuff looks like this. And I would pull up an Instagram page to show them how Instagram does something almost identical to this when you go to your profile in Instagram. Just to show them the connection between what we're doing here and what we do and like what big, huge social media companies do as well. This video is really long, but I just want to show you the power of using a framework like Materialize. I wrote no CSS basically. All you do in these frameworks is you go in there and you check to see how they work. And this is something I have students do continuously. I was like, I'll give them ideas like, how does the grid system work? How do colors in Materialize work? The colors here are so nice. They have this color palette of all the different beautiful colors. I come here almost every time I build an app just because I love the color choices they use. So I'll come in, I'll just steal their colors for everything. And the components are really where the power of these frameworks are. So you can build badges, buttons, breadcrumbs, cards, chips, footers. Their forms are so pretty. Like the placeholder, like look at this nice little effect. I love that. The last name effect, like kids love feeling like their stuff looks really professional without a ton of stuff. So this can be great. These are also, you'll see these everywhere, these icon prefixes, and you get this JavaScript for free. Don't forget that. So never underestimate the power of a framework built into a Sinatra app. And this took me about like 15 minutes, but I knew where to look. With your students, you'll have them go through it together and hopefully they can figure it out.